Welcome to this 365 Freedom Strategy session. Today, we're breaking down the mechanics of aligned selling and why your biggest sales bottleneck is your obsession with features.
Right, and that is exactly the mission for our time today.
Yeah.
We are analyzing the core mechanics of ScaleSale, specifically aligned selling, and tracing what we call the vision-first path.
Which is so critical.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because before we get into the heavy analysis, we need to establish the baseline truth from our source material.
The core argument.
Exactly. The core argument is simply this. People buy the future they can see.
Right.
And your job as the founder, as the partner on the other side of the table, is to help them see it clearly.
Help them see it clearly. Because if you aren't doing that, you're not actually selling. You're just taking inventory.
You're reading a list.
Yeah. I think a lot of founders, and frankly, I've done this myself in the early days.
Oh, we all have.
Right. You actively sabotage your own authority during the sales process because you completely misunderstand what the buyer actually needs in that moment.
It's a fundamental disconnect.
It is. So let's look closely at why leading with features feels incredibly safe to you as the seller, but completely isolates the buyer.
Let's start with the diagnosis. We refer to this as the catalog mindset.
The catalog mindset. Yeah, let's break that down.
It's the primary reason your authority just evaporates the second you start your pitch. Let's look at the psychology of this feature trap.
The feature trap.
Right. When you're a new seller, or even an experienced founder launching a new offer, you're stepping into an inherently vulnerable position.
Highly vulnerable.
You are asking someone to exchange their capital for your expertise. That creates a feeling of exposure.
You feel like you have to prove your worth on the spot.
Exactly. So to bridge that feeling of vulnerability, most founders reflexively build a fortress out of deliverables.
A fortress of features.
Yes. They list the weekly coaching calls, the 12 video modules, the private community access,
The template.
the downloadable templates, the 24/7 Slack support. They pile on the features because it creates an illusion of quantifiable value.
It feels safe.
It feels incredibly safe. You point to a 60-minute call and you say to yourself, look, this has tangible weight. I can justify my price tag with this.
I know exactly what you mean by that fortress. I remember the very first time I tried selling a consulting package years ago.
What happened?
I was so anxious about the price I was asking for that I practically threw in my weekends, my personal cell phone number.
The kitchen sink.
Literally the kitchen sink, just to make the value seem heavier to the client. I thought I was making this irresistible offer.
But it backfired.
Completely backfired. The client looked exhausted just listening to me list all the things we were going to do.
Because you were confusing volume with value.
Right. I assumed that if I stacked enough features on the scale, the buyer's hesitation would just be outweighed by the sheer mass of the deliverables.
And that is the trap. The buyer isn't weighing deliverables.
No, they aren't.
They aren't sitting there thinking, yes, 14 PDFs equal $5,000. That's not how human beings make purchasing decisions.
They're trying to weigh the desired outcome against their current pain.
Exactly. So when you bombard them with features, you aren't answering their internal questions. You're just giving them homework.
You're making them think too hard.
You're shifting the entire cognitive load onto them. Which brings us to the critical distinction between acting as a catalog versus acting as a guide.
Let's analyze those two personas, because I think this is where the dynamic really shifts for anyone listening.
A catalog is totally passive.
Right. Think about the last time you looked at a catalog, whether it was for auto parts or office supplies.
It just sits there.
It just sits there, presenting a static list of parts, specifications, and prices. When you get on a sales call and start resetting your features, you are adopting that exact persona.
You're acting like a piece of mail.
Yes, you're a piece of mail. And while those details might matter eventually, they do not create desire.
A list of modules does not build momentum.
Exactly. A catalog puts the entire burden of translation on the buyer.
And that forced translation is the exact point of sabotage.
How so? Let's dig into that mechanism.
When you act like a catalog, you force the buyer to do all the heavy lifting. You're essentially saying, here are 12 modules and 6 calls. Now, I need you to figure out exactly how these raw materials assemble into a solution for your specific, highly stressful problem.
You're making them work to understand why your offer matters to their life.
Right. You're demanding that they act as the visionary, but they came to you because they lack the vision. A guide does the exact opposite.
A guide points to the destination.
A guide says, here is where we're going, and here's what it looks like when we finally arrive.
I want to push back here for a second, just to represent our listeners who sell highly technical services.
Let's do it.
Because let's say you are selling high-ticket B2B software or complex supply chain logistics. Don't those buyers have a literal checklist of technical features they need?
They absolutely do.
So how do you act as a guide without frustrating a buyer who just wants to know if your API integrates with Salesforce?
That is a fantastic point of friction, and it's a trap a lot of technical founders fall into. Yes, the technical buyer has a checklist. Yes, they need to know about the API integration.
Right.
But why do they need the API integration? They don't want the integration for the sake of having it.
They want it to solve a problem.
Exactly. They want it because their current system is creating data silos, causing their sales team to miss follow-ups and costing them revenue.
The API integration is just the feature.
The destination is a seamless data flow where their sales team closes 20% more deals because the information is instantly accessible.
So even the most technical buyer is still a human being trying to alleviate a specific professional pain.
Precisely. If you start with the API specifications, you're a catalog. If you start with, we're going to eliminate your data silos so your sales team never misses a lead again, and here's the specific integration that makes it happen, you are a guide.
You own the map.
You own the map, and you give them the context for their checklist.
When you force them to translate the features into that outcome themselves, you are abdicating your authority. You're just hoping they connect the dots on their own.
And hope is not a strategy. When you lead with the future, you are the one connecting the dots. You control the narrative.
Which shatters what we call the illusion of information.
The illusion of information is a massive misconception. Founders think giving a buyer more data, more features, more deliverables, more bonuses equals making a stronger pitch.
It doesn't.
It absolutely doesn't. Information is neutral. The source material points out that features are helpful, but they don't move people to action.
Vision does.
Vision does. When you just dump data on them, you are building a stronger pitch. You're just building a higher wall they have to climb over to see the actual value of what you're selling.
Let's transition to the second part of our agenda, which is looking at this concept through a very specific lens. There's a story in the source material about a new entrepreneur that captures this entire dynamic perfectly.
The uncomfortable seller.
Yes, the uncomfortable seller. They were completely paralyzed on sales calls. They specifically shared that selling felt incredibly uncomfortable for them. They dreaded the process.
And the text pinpoints exactly why. They were trapped in that feature listing cycle.
They listed everything included in their program, but the buyers still felt unsure.
Let's really analyze the discomfort in that specific room. Why does selling feel so uncomfortable in that state?
It isn't because selling is inherently sleazy or manipulative.
No, it feels uncomfortable because there is a palpable disconnection happening in real time. You're pushing parts, and the buyer is looking for a lifeline.
The seller is listing deliverables, frantically trying to justify the price tag in their own head.
And the buyer is sitting there, arms crossed, unsure, creating a literal wall of hesitation between the two of them.
And that wall is built entirely out of untranslated features. The seller feels the hesitation. They read the body language. But because they're trapped in that catalog mindset, their instinct is to throw even more features at the wall.
Oh, you're not convinced by the 6 calls? What if I add a private Slack channel?
What if I give you my swipe files? It's a vicious cycle of overcompensation.
The seller feels awkward because they know on a gut level that they aren't actually connecting with the buyer's true desires. They're just talking at them about logistics.
Then we reach the turning point in the microstory, and it's a very precise pivot.
The exact moment things changed.
The turning point came when the seller finally stopped describing the offer and started describing the future it created.
They stopped talking about the vehicle and started talking about the destination.
They painted a picture of what life could look like for the buyer after working together.
Notice the timeline shift there. They moved the conversation completely out of the messy logistical middle.
Well, working together phase.
Right, the phase filled with calls and modules. They jumped straight over that to the clean, resolved end state, the after.
And what was the immediate result? The text notes a very specific physical reaction.
The buyer leaned in.
The buyer leaned in. That behavioral shift is everything. Why does a human being physically lean in during a conversation like this?
They lean in because the friction just dissolved.
They lean in because the defensive posture they were holding, that rigid posture required to evaluate a list of claims and calculate ROI on the spot, is no longer necessary.
They lean in because suddenly they see themselves inside that future.
When you describe an outcome that actually solves their pain, You trigger their imagination.
They aren't auditing your modules anymore. They're experiencing a mental preview of their own relief.
That physical shift represents a massive psychological shift.
The buyer moved from skepticism to alignment. The text says the offer wasn't just information anymore, it became a path.
That is the exact transition from static data to dynamic movement.
When the buyer leans in, the hardest part of the sale is essentially over. The adversarial dynamic of seller pitching to a buyer has collapsed.
You are no longer sitting across from each other. You are now two people standing shoulder to shoulder, looking together down a shared path. Let's expand on that idea of a path, because it brings us to a crucial technical difference we need to establish for you, the listener.
We need to clearly define the difference between providing information and providing direction.
Because if you were to audit your marketing right now, your landing pages, your emails, your sales decks, my guess is that most of your assets are purely providing information.
Let's break down what information actually is in this context.
Features.
Right, the hours, the modules, the calls, the templates, they are purely information.
They are static coordinates on a map.
They are helpful if someone is trying to understand the basic logistics of your process, but they do nothing to generate momentum.
They explain what the thing is structurally.
But they completely fail to answer the buyer's loudest internal question: where does this actually take me?
If I hand you a list of car parts, a steering wheel, 4 tires, an engine block, some leather seats, I have given you a lot of highly accurate information.
But you haven't given me a car.
And I certainly haven't given you a road trip. When you just provide information, the buyer is left staring at a pile of parts on the garage floor.
When you provide direction, you show them the road trip.
Defining direction means showing them the vector. It implies movement.
Let's look at how that direction creates actual momentum in a sales conversation.
The mechanics of momentum.
When you describe the outcome someone is stepping into, you are doing something very profound. You are creating a cognitive gap between where they are right now, which is usually a state of pain or stagnation, and where they could be.
But instead of leaving them stranded across that gap, your offer becomes the bridge.
Suddenly, they see possibility. They see change. They see themselves progressing.
That vision creates psychological momentum.
They want to start moving toward that future. And buying your offer becomes the logical first step of that movement.
And this momentum doesn't just benefit the buyer. We really need to talk about the mutual confidence this creates.
Building this vision grounds the conversation for you, the seller.
It removes that awkwardness we talked about earlier. When you're selling a destination, a transformed life, a scaled business, a resolved pain point, the price tag suddenly makes contextual sense.
Let's say you're a high-ticket agency charging $50,000 for a brand overhaul.
If you try to justify 50 grand by listing the number of logo revisions and brand strategy workshops, you're going to sound completely ridiculous.
The buyer will do the math and think, I'm paying $3,000 an hour for a workshop. No thanks.
Precisely. But if you sell the destination, if you say, we are going to position your brand so that you can confidently raise your prices by 30% and stop losing bids to competitors who look more premium than you, the $50,000 becomes an investment in a highly lucrative future.
You aren't trying to convince them that your time is worth $50,000.
You're showing them that solving their biggest problem and claiming that new market position is worth $50,000.
The confidence becomes mutual. The buyer feels confident because they clearly see the outcome, and the seller feels confident because they know they can deliver that outcome without having to defend their hourly rate.
You're no longer an uncomfortable seller peddling parts. You're an authority extending an invitation.
It changes your entire posture. You aren't defensive, you aren't over-explaining, you're calmly presenting a path.
Now, the structural question becomes, how do we practically execute this? Let's move into the mechanics of vision-first selling.
The source text gives us a very specific mandate. It says to shift from explaining to illustrating.
We have to discuss what this really means in practice because the difference is subtle but massive.
Explaining is inherently analytical. It targets the logical, rational part of the brain that wants to compare prices, audit features, and look for flaws.
Illustrating is visceral. It bypasses the audit and goes straight to the emotional core.
What does it mean to paint a picture and make an outcome tangible?
It means attaching the outcome to their actual day-to-day reality. It's not saying you will have better business processes. That's explaining. That sounds like a textbook.
Illustrating is saying, imagine logging off at 5 p.m. on a Friday, knowing your fulfillment is running entirely on autopilot, and you don't have to check your Slack channel once during dinner with your family.
You're making the offer feel real to the buyer. You're placing them inside the movie of their own life post-purchase.
But we have to insert a massive warning here, which the text explicitly highlights.
Grounded truth versus exaggeration.
Yes. This vision cannot cross into fantasy. The text states, vision is one of the most powerful tools in selling. Not exaggerated promises or dramatic claims, but a grounded, believable description of what someone's life or business can look like.
This is where so many marketers and founders completely miss the mark.
They think vision means promising $1 million in 30 days, or a life entirely devoid of stress and problems.
When you use exaggerated promises, you instantly trigger the buyer's skepticism. Their defense mechanisms slam right back up.
You lose your authority because you sound like a late-night infomercial host, not a trusted guide.
A grounded vision is powerful precisely because it is believable. It is anchored in reality.
It is an outcome they can logically see themselves achieving with your help and their effort.
To ensure your vision remains both powerful and grounded, the text provides a trinity of requirements. 3 mandates for presenting the future.
Make it clear, make it simple, make it believable.
Let's break each of those down with some concrete examples, starting with clarity.
The text tells us that clarity cuts through hesitation.
If your vision of the future is muddy, or if it's filled with industry jargon, it's not a vision, it's just more confusion. The buyer needs to see the outcome in high definition.
If you're a fitness coach, your vision isn't optimizing your metabolic pathways.
That's jargon.
The clear vision is waking up with enough energy to play with your kids without feeling winded.
Next is simplicity. Make it simple.
Complexity absolutely kills deals. If the future you're describing requires a flowchart to understand, you've already lost them.
The outcome should be able to be stated in a single, compelling sentence.
You aren't trying to impress them with the complexity of your framework. You're trying to relieve their anxiety with the simplicity of the solution.
The path must look navigable, not exhausting. But I want to ask for a clarification here.
Go ahead.
What if the problem is inherently complex? What if you're dealing with a corporate procurement department that demands complexity? They want the flowcharts. They want the Gantt charts.
You give the procurement department the Gantt charts because that is their specific language. That's the information they need to justify the purchase to their boss.
But the decision maker, the VP or the director who actually has the pain, still needs the simple vision.
Exactly. The simple vision for them is, we are going to cut your deployment time in half. You use the simple vision to win the heart of the decision maker, and you use the complex features to satisfy the logical checklist of the procurement team.
But you never lead with the Gantt chart. You lead with the cut in deployment time.
Satisfy the logic, but win the emotion.
And that brings us to the third pillar. Make it believable. This circles back to grounding the vision in reality.
Believability removes the friction of doubt.
If it's clear, if it's simple, and if it's entirely believable that they can achieve it with your help, you have created the perfect environment for a transaction. You've aligned their desire with your solution.
Let's connect this grounded vision to the specific emotions it evokes in the buyer.
When the entrepreneur in the microstory shifted to vision, the text notes 3 specific emotions.
Clarity, confidence, and a clear path forward.
These are the exact emotions you want to engineer.
When a buyer feels clarity, they feel safe.
When they feel confidence, they feel empowered to make a financial decision.
When they recognize a clear path forward, they feel relief.
Ultimately, you are selling relief from their current state of friction.
We've diagnosed the problem, we've looked at the psychology, we've defined the mechanics.
Now we need to move to tactical application for you, because understanding this conceptually is useless if you don't change how you actually operate.
We want to challenge you right now to evaluate your current sales message.
Pull up your website, look at your pitch deck, listen to the last sales call you recorded.
Are you leading with features, or are you leading with the future?
Are you acting like a catalog, or are you acting like a guide?
You have to be ruthlessly honest with your evaluation. If you look at your landing page, and the biggest text on the screen is a list of bullet points outlining how many revision rounds they get, you are stuck in the feature trap.
To fix this, we have a highly actionable exercise for you, pulled directly from the source material.
The mandate is this. Write a short paragraph describing the exact future your offer helps someone step into.
Not the features, not the process, the future.
Think about what life looks like for them after they work with you. Paint the picture, make it tangible, write it down.
This single paragraph becomes the foundational anchor for all of your messaging moving forward.
Because this isn't just about changing what you say on a live sales call, it's about refining your entire message across every single touch point.
Exactly. Let's discuss how implementing this vision-first lens completely transforms how the market responds to your offer.
Let's start with a live sales call. How do you pivot when a buyer gets on the call and immediately asks for features?
They say, hey, thanks for jumping on. Can you just walk me through what's included in the package?
If you aren't prepared, you'll fall right back into catalog mode.
You'll start listing modules. Instead, you have to acknowledge the question but redirect to the vision.
You say, I'm happy to walk you through exactly what's included, but before I do, I want to make sure I understand exactly where you're trying to go, because the features only matter if they actually get you to your specific goal.
What does the ideal outcome look like for you in 6 months?
You take back control of the map, you act as the guide.
Let's look at email marketing. Look at the templates provided in the source text. They all execute this exact strategy.
An amateur email sequence just lists reasons to buy. Here's module 1, here's module 2, don't miss out.
But a vision-first email changes the paradigm. The subject line literally reads, people don't buy features, they buy a future.
The body of the email illustrates what happens when they finally solve their problem.
You condition your audience to associate your brand not with the heavy lifting of your process, but with the relief of your promised outcome.
The same applies to short-form video and social posts.
Let's do a quick teardown. A bad short-form video is a dry tutorial. Here are 3 ways to organize your CRM.
It's purely information.
A vision-first video script hook asks, want to make your offer more compelling, and immediately pivots to stop leading with features, start leading with the future.
It connects a pain point uncompelling offers to a new reality.
Your content stops blending in with the hundreds of other catalogs in their feed, and you stand out as the sole guide pointing them toward the exact outcome they are desperate to achieve.
By the time they actually get on a sales call with you after consuming that kind of content, the heavy lifting's already done.
They already see the path.
The call simply becomes a confirmation of logistics, a check to make sure the fit is right, rather than an uphill battle to prove your worth and justify your pricing.
Before we wrap up this session, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over.
Think about your ideal buyer right now.
If they were to summarize your offer to a colleague today, how would they describe it? Would they describe a list of parts?
Would they say, oh, they're selling 6 coaching calls in a private Slack channel?
Or would they describe a new version of themselves? Would they say, they're going to help me automate my fulfillment so I can actually take my weekends back?
If your buyer cannot articulate the future you are promising, you are not providing direction. You are just making noise.
It all comes back to the baseline truth we established at the very beginning of this session.
People buy the future they can see.
If they are looking at you and only seeing features, they cannot see the future.
Your primary responsibility, your most critical task as a founder and a seller, is to clear away the clutter of your deliverables and illuminate the path forward.
If you're ready to create clearer, more compelling sales conversations, visit 365 Freedom online to join the community. This has been a 365 Freedom Strategy session.